The Ramayana is an earlier Indonesian book. Part 6 is complete. Santo Saba works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on academic studies and studies, in an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. Indonesia Arya. By Santo Saba. Exploration and research. Complete info. WhatsApp to +62 813 2132 9787. Sumali. Sumali is a character in the Ramayana known as Ravana's grandfather, the antagonist in the story. Sumali has an older brother named Mali and a younger brother named Maliawan. The three of them received the gift of Lord Brahma so that they have extraordinary powers. However, these powers were misused to conquer heaven. Finally, they were defeated by Lord Vishnu and expelled from the Alenka kingdom. Sumali and her two siblings, namely Mali and Maliawan, begged for a gift so that the three of them would love each other so that their sense of brotherhood never broke. And they also begged to have extraordinary powers so that no one could conquer them. The request was granted by Brahma, the creator god. However, these powers were actually misused to invade heaven. Sumali and his two brothers conquered the gods and daityas. With his power, Sumali asked Wiswakarma to make a city beautiful and magnificent. Wiswakarma was forced to fulfill the request and build a city called Alenka. Since then Sumali and his two siblings have lived in luxury in the kingdom of Alenka. Sumali himself had 10 sons, namely Prahasta, Akampana, Wikada, Kalakamuka, Dumraksa, Danda, Suparswa, Sanity and Barkarna. In addition, he also has a daughter named Kaiksi. Sumali's heyday is finally over. One day he was defeated by the gods led by Vishnu. After losing her two siblings, Sumali fled and hid at the bottom of the earth. Wisanu then handed over the Alenka kingdom to Kubera, the son of Wisrawa. Sumali schemes to reclaim her country. He married his daughter, Kaiksi, to Wisrawa so that a mighty son named Dasamuka was born. As an adult, Dasamuka managed to reclaim the Alenka throne from the hands of Kubera, his half-brother. This Dasamuka later became known as Rawana. The puppet version, especially the one that developed in Java, tells the story of Sumali being called the son of Puksara, a descendant of Hiranyakasipu, the founder of the Alenka kingdom. Sumali had an empress named Danuwati from the kingdom of Mantili, from whom two children named Suksi and Prahasta were born. Even though Sumali was a giant, Suksi and Prahasta were human like their mother. Suksi, who is fond of literature, was interested in studying Sastrajendra Hayuningrat, a very rare sacred literature. At that time a rishi arrived who was none other than Sumali's own brother, named Wisrawa. Wisrawa's arrival was to apply for Suksi as the wife of his son named Danapati. Sumali conveyed Suksi's wish to only be willing to marry if someone could teach him Sastrajendra Hayuningrat. Wisrawa claimed to have mastered the literature, but he did not dare to teach carelessly because it was very sacred. Whoever hears it will find true enlightenment and happiness. Sumali was curious and begged to be taught this literature. Wisrawa also granted it. As a result of hearing the reading of this literature, Sumali turned into a human, no longer a giant. Meanwhile, Prahasta, who was lurking without permission, turned into a giant. Sumitra. Dewi Sumitra is also known as Dewi Pretty. She is the daughter of Batharahira, Prabhu Ruriana, the king of Maspati, which means the grandson of King Arjunawijaya or King Arjunasasra and his consort Dewi Citrawati. Dewi Sumitra has a very beautiful face. It has the nature and characteristics: loyal, generous, kind, patient, Jadmika always politely, and very devoted. Dewi Sumitra became the third consort of Prabhu Dasarata, the king of the Ayodhya state. The other two Empress Prabhu Dasarata are Dewi Kusalya, Dewi Raghu, the mother of Ramawijaya, and Dewi Kekai, the mother of Bharata. From her marriage to Prabhu Dasarata, Dewi Sumitra obtained a very handsome son named Radan Lasmana who is believed to be the incarnation of Bathara Suman. It was 13 years that Dewi Sumitra had to separate from her only son, Lasmana, who went to follow Ramawijaya, leaving the country of Ayodhya to undergo the banishment law at the will of Dewi Kekai. During this time he faithfully and patiently accompanied and comforted Dewi Kusalya. Dewi Sumitra died in old age. He still had time to witness and enjoy the heyday of the Ayodhya state under the rule of King Ramawijaya with his only son, Lasmana. Sarpanaka. Sarpanaka, Javanese. Sarpakanaka is a character of Ramayana. She is Ravana's younger brother, and is a Rakshasi or female Rakshasa. He lives in Yanasthana, the Pararakshasa border post in Chitrakuta. When Sarpanaka passed through the forest, he was happy to see Rama and wanted to marry him. Changing his ugly form into a beautiful woman, he began to approach Ramadan asking for marriage. Rama refused because he performed Ekapadnivrata or married only once. Then Rama told Sarpanaka to seduce the more handsome Laxmana. After leaving Rama, he tried to seduce Laxmana. But her love was rejected because Laxmana said that she was the servant of her brother, and it would be better if Sarpanaka be the second wife of Rama than to be the wife of the first Laxmana. Sarpanaka, who was getting annoyed, tried to scratch Sita, who was looking at him sarcastically. Then Rama protected Sita while Laxmana took his sword. When Sarpanaka attacked Laxmana, Laxmana's sword injured the Rakshasi's nose. Finally Sarpanaka ran and complained to Kara. After Kara dies at the hands of Rama, he provokes Ravana. In Javanese puppetry, there is a different version of the Sarpanaka story when he was injured in the middle of a forest. Sarpanaka did not meet Rama, but immediately teased Laxmana. But Laxmana refused Sarpanaka because it smelled a little fishy for a beautiful woman. Then he was angry and his nose was injured by Laxmana. Finally Sarpanaka fled to Alenka to provoke her brother, Ravana, to kidnap Dewi Sita. Characteristics: his face is old and ugly, fat belly and eyes squint, his hair is long loose but stiff like a palm. His voice is hard, he is evil and full of deceit. He has a rough and naughty personality. His chest sticks out sharply, like any other giant. Tataka. In the Ramayana, Tataka aka Taraka is a Rakshasi, the daughter of a Yaksa named Saketu, and the mother of the giant Marika. He was cursed by Resi Agastya to look bad. He lives in the Dandaka forest with his son. After terrorizing the sages, he was killed by Prince Rama and Laxmana from Ayodhya, who were traveling to Siddhasrama with Resi Wiswamitra. The origin is that in the beginning, the Yaksa Saketu did not have children, then he meditated to ask for the grace of Lord Brahma. Brahma then gave the gift that Saketu would not have a son, but only a princess, but his strength was equivalent to that of an elephant. The daughter was Tataka. Tataka married a giant, and had sons named Subahu and Marika. Because her husband died as a result of the curse of Resi Agastya, Tataka and Marika wanted to kill the Rishi but were unsuccessful. The angry Rishi then cursed them so that they had bad faces and lived on eating human flesh. One legend says that Tataka's husband was a Sundanese giant, while another version says that her husband was Sumali. Tataka and Marika lived in the Dandaka forest and terrorized the lives of the sages. They often preyed on the flesh of the sages and stained their ceremonies with blood and flesh. Because cursing someone would pollute the purity of the sages, Resi Wiswamitra finally asked Prince Rama and Laxmana from Ayodhya to protect the Dandaka forest from the terror of Tataka. When Tataka saw the arrival of the two princes, his appetite rose to devour them without a trace. Tataka attacked, but Rama and Laxmana were able to fend off Tataka's attack. Finally the fight was fierce. When it was late evening, Resi Wiswamitra told Rama not to delay the time to end Tataka's history because at night the strength of the giant nation grew bigger. With a magic arrow weapon while chanting a spell, Rama shot Tataka to death. After Tataka was defeated, Rama and Laxmana followed Resi Wiswamitra to Siddhasrama. Urmila. In the Ramayana, Urmila is the daughter of Raja Janaka from Mithila. She is the younger brother of Sita, and the wife of Laxmana, Rama's younger brother. He has two sons named Angada and Dharmakatu, another version says Taksaka and Sitrakatu. According to one version of the Ramayana, when Laxmana accompanied Rama to undergo exile for 14 years, Urmila went mad and then fell unconscious. He passed out again after Laxmana returned from exile. Vibhishana. Vibhishana is the name of a character in the epic Ramayana. He was Ravana's younger brother who crossed over to Sri Rama's side. In the great war between the Rakshasa people against Vanara, Vibhishana did a lot to leak the weaknesses of his people, so that the Vanara party led by Rama won. After Ravana's death, Vibhishana became king of Alenka. In Javanese puppetry, Vibhishana is often referred to by the full name Ganawan Kuntawibhisana. His residence is called Kasatri in Parangkuntara. Family tree. According to another version of the Ramayana, Wibisana is the youngest son of the pair Wisrawa and Kaiksi. His father is a son of Pulastya, while her mother is the daughter of Sumali, a Rakshasa king from the kingdom of Alenka. Another version, namely Mahabharata, mentions Wibisana as the son of Wisrawa and Malini. According to the second version, Kaiksi only gave birth to two sons, namely Rawana and Kumbhakarna. Wibisana married a woman from the Rakshasa nation named Sarama. His wife was also wise. He became the protector of Rama's wife Sita when he was held captive by Rawana. Even though he comes from the Rakshasa nation, Wibisana has a different personality. Usually the Rakshasas are told as troublemakers, Brahmin rioters, and human flesh eaters. However, Wibisana was known to be gentle-hearted and lived a life of wisdom. Wibisana spent his youth in meditation worshipping Vishnu. He also worships Brahma along with his two older brothers, namely Rawana and Kumbhakarna. When Lord Brahma came down to give boon, Rawana and Kumbhakarna asked to be given strength and supernatural powers to be able to conquer the gods. Wibisana has a different attitude. Instead, he asked to always be on the path of truth or dharma. He did not ask for strength, but asked for wisdom. In the Ramayana, after failing to persuade his brother to return Sita to Rama, Wibisana decided to side with Rama, whom he believed to be the right one. This means that he must fight his own brother, Ravana, in defense of the truth. It is interesting to see that Kumbhakarna, who is also a sibling to Wibisana and Rawana, takes the opposite position, in which Kumbhakarna continues to defend the homeland, even though he realizes that he is on the wrong side. Wibisana is a character who shows that the truth penetrates the boundaries of nationalism, even the bonds of brotherhood. Wibisana sided with Rama. Feeling that he did not have a place in Alenka, Wibisana went with good empathy and faced Rama. On the way he was intercepted by Sugriva, the Wanara king who suspected Wibisana from Alenka's arrival. After Rama was sure that Wibisana was not a bad person, Wibisana promised eternal friendship. In his mission to destroy Ravana, Wibisana told many secrets of Alenka and the details of every giant that was facing Rama and his troops. Wibisana was also aware that a spy had infiltrated the Wanara army and reported it to Rama. When Indrajit tricked the Wanara army, Wibisana was a perceptive person and knew Indrajit's cunning intellect. When Kumbhakarna advanced to face Rama and his troops, Wibisana begged him to be given the opportunity to talk with his brother. Rama granted and invited Wibisana to chat before the battle broke out. When he came face to face with Kumbhakarna, Wibisana begged Kumbhakarna to forgive his mistake because he had crossed over to the enemy side. Wibisana was also resigned if Kumbhakarna wanted to kill him. Seeing the sincerity of her sister, Kumbhakarna felt refreshed. Kumbhakarna did not blame Wibisana for doing the right thing. Kumbhakarna also says that he fought because he was bound by obligations, and not because of his own intentions. After chatting, Wibisana excused himself from before Kumbhakarna and invited him to come forward to face Rama. After Kumbhakarna and Rawana were killed by Rama, Wibisana and his friends organized a proper burning ceremony for the two knights. Then he was crowned the legitimate king of Alenka. He took care of Mandodari, the widow left behind by Rawana, and lived with his queen, Sarma. Wibisana ruled Alenka wisely. He turned Alenka into a city based on dharma and virtue, after being damaged by Ravana's rule. Puppet version. In the puppet show, Wibisana is depicted as having a handsome face and being born as a human like his father, not a giant. His father, named Wisrawa from Argawaranjan hermitage, while his mother was named Suksi from the Alenka kingdom. Wibisana married an angel named Trawati. From this marriage, two children named Trajata and Bisawarna were born. Trajata acts as a nurse and guardian of Sintakat when Ravana is imprisoned. Wibisana crossed over to Rama's side after being kicked out by Rawana for daring to oppose the actions of her brother who had kidnapped Sinta. He later became a war strategy advisor on Rama's side. In Javanese puppetry, it was Wibisana, not Laxmana, who killed Indrajit, the son of Rawana. After Rawana was killed, Wibisana refused to become king of Alenka. In the Javanese tradition, there is a belief that a palace that was recently damaged by the enemy is not good to live in because it still has negative energy. Therefore, Wibisana built a new capital city in Parangkuntara, and changed the name of the Alenka kingdom to the Kingdom of Singapore. After ruling for a long time, Wibisana stepped down to become a rishi on Mount Sindramanik. The kingdom of Singalapura was then passed on to his son, Bisawarna, who had the title Prabu Dantawilukrama. Wibisana reached Moksha during the life of the Pandavas. Viswamitra. Visvamitra is the name of one of the Brahmarisis. In the name Viswamitra also appears in the Ramayana scriptures, along with Rezi Vasista. Sunasepa's sacrifice. While Viswamitra was still carrying out his penance to obtain the title Brahmarasi, he helped a child named Sunasepa who was going to be sacrificed to Varuna, the god of the sea. The ceremony was held by Raja Harishchandra, and because Prince Rohita was not willing to be sacrificed, so Sunasepa's parents offered their son to be sacrificed. On the way to the ceremony, Sunasepa met Viswamitra who was doing meditation. Sunasepa knelt at Viswamitra's feet to ask for help. Finally Viswamitra taught Sunasepa a secret mantra. When the sacrifice was performed, the child sang a mantra given by Viswamitra so that Dewa Indra and Varuna were impressed, and also the sacrifice could run smoothly. In the Ramayana, Viswamitra becomes the teacher for Rama and Laxmana when they are in the middle of the forest. Viswamitra taught Rama and Laxmana to teach sacred mantras and the use of a divine weapon called Dewastra. When the Rishi's residence was terrorized by the giants, Viswamitra was reluctant to curse the giants because it would tarnish the purity of their tapas. At the request of the Pararasi, Viswamitra came to Ayodhya to ask Rama for help. Basada, who was afraid of Viswamitra's curse, did not dare to refuse, so he gave up his son. Accompanied by Rama and Laxmana, Rezi Viswamitra took a long journey. They spent the night at a resting place near the Sarayu River. Ramayana news from its original source in Java. Ramayana by some puppeteers is called Sastrajendra. Prabhu Sumali announced the competition, that whoever could describe Jendra Pangruwading Diu's literary knowledge, would be able to become the husband of his daughter, namely Dui Suksi. This chanted knowledge is secret knowledge, known only to the gods. Therefore, no one tries to join the competition. In the kingdom of Lopakapala, King Dhanaraja asked his father, Bhagawan Wisrawa, to propose Dui Suksi to him. Therefore, Bhagawan Wisrawa then left for Alenka to participate in the competition. Because the knowledge to be described as secret knowledge, Bhagawan Wisrawa and Dewisuksi must be in a closed room. When Bhagawan Wisrawa started his teachings, heaven was stirred, because of the influence of that knowledge. To prevent the spread of knowledge, Bhattara Guru and Dui Uma came down to the world. Bhattara Guru infiltrated Wisrawa's body, while Dui Uma entered Dui Suksi's body. As a result, the relationship between teacher and student turned into a relationship between a man and a woman who was drunk by romance. Because of this incident, Bhagawan Wisrawa was eventually married to Dui Suksi. The news of this marriage made King Dhanaraja angry. He then deployed the Lokapala army to invade Alenka to punish his father, who he thought had betrayed him. When Lord Wisrawa and King Dhanaraja were fighting, Bhattara Narada came to intervene. Narada said that Dui Suksi was indeed a soulmate for tourists. Before the war broke out between the monkey army who sided with Ramawijaya and the giant army of the Alenka kingdom, Ramawijaya sent Angada to give an ultimatum to Prabhu Dasamukha. When Angada met Prabhu Dasamukha, the king of Alenka incited him by saying that Angada was actually his nephew, and the death of Rezi Subali, Angada's father, was the result of Rama's actions. Ingested by the incitement, Angadak returned and immediately attacked Rama. Fortunately, Ganawan Wibisana and Anuman managed to revive Angada. Angada then returned to Alenka and gave a false report that Rama and Laxmana were dead. When Prabhu Dasamukha was rejoicing at the good news, Angada attacked him, and managed to seize and escape the crown of the king of Alenka, and then fled. The efforts of the Alenka soldiers to catch him were in vain. The Alenka crown was presented to Ramawijaya, but Rama then handed it over to Prabhu Sugriva. Prabhu Dasamukha handed over Dui Sinta, who was kidnapped by him, under the supervision of Dui Trajata in Argasoka Park, his nephew. Meanwhile Ragawa alias Rama continues to search for his missing wife. He has received instructions from Jatayu that Sinta was kidnapped by the king of Alenka named Prabhu Dasamukha. Rama's journey to Alenka was accompanied by Laksamana, his younger brother, and Prabhu Sugriva as well as the entire Guakaskanda royal army. After building a camp in the Mangliawan area, Ramawijaya sent Anoman to become an ambassador, to meet Dwi Sinta at the Alenka palace. This makes Angada jealous, resulting in a fight with Anoman. Rama then made Angada aware that later there would be another important task for Angada. Anoman's journey to Alenka turns out to be full of obstacles. At first he met Dwi Sayamprabha, one of Prabhu Dasamukha's wives. Anoman is seduced, and given a dish of poisoned fruits. As a result, Anoman became blind. Luckily he was helped by Sempati, a giant bird who had been persecuted by Dasamukha. Thanks to Sempati's help, Anoman's blindness was cured. He was also helped by Bhagawan Mainaka, his Bayu's only brother, so that he could reach the land of Alenka. Arriving at Alenka, Sengana went to Argasoka Park to meet Dwi Sintad with the ring given by Rama. During the meeting Dwi Sinta handed over her condiment stick, with a message to be conveyed to Ramawijaya, with a message that Sinta is still loyal to her husband. After completing his mission as an ambassador, Anoman deliberately got himself arrested. The infiltration incident made Dasamukha angry, so he ordered the burning of Sengana alive. After his fur caught fire, Anoman broke free from his ties, and jumped here and there to burn the Alenka palace. After causing a lot of damage, he returned to face Ramawijaya. Dwi Anjani, who is sad because her beautiful face has turned into a monkey face. On the advice of his father, Lord Gautama, he meditated on Nyantoka, like a frog soaking in Tulaga Matarda. There is a version that calls it Nirmala Lake, only the head appears on the surface of the water. For months, Dwi Anjani only ate things that drifted on the surface of the water and passed in front of her mouth. One day Bhattara Guru was traveling around the world, checking the condition of the world. When he flew across Mandarda Lake, he saw the body of a woman soaking in the clear lake. Instantly his passion fluctuated, so that the kama seeds fell, falling on a young tamarind leaf. The young tamarind leaves fell to the surface of the lake, right in front of Dwi Anjani's mouth. Immediately Anjani ate the tamarind leaves. In Javanese society, the leaves of tamarind young are called sinam. Once the young tamarind leaves were swallowed, Dwi Anjani felt she was pregnant. Immediately he was looking for who was the cause. When he saw Bhattara Guru floating above him, he immediately demanded responsibility for the fetus he was carrying. Bhattara Guru did not deny that responsibility. When it was time for childbirth, Bhattara Guru sent several angels to help with the birth of the baby in the form of a smooth white monkey. Then Dwi Anjani was Dhairawat so that she became beautiful again and lived in heaven. The baby who was born was given the name Anoman. In heaven, when Bhattara Guru was holding Anoman's baby, Bhattara Narada laughed at him. Immediately Bhattara Guru approached him, and placed a piece of Nila leaf on Narada's back, and immediately on the back of Bhattara Narada, a baby monkey colored indigo blue. The baby monkey was named Anila. The gods who were present all laughed. Because he felt laughed at, Bhattara Guru then ordered the gods to create a monkey for their respective children. Prabhu Garbhamurti from Jongarbha will take revenge on Arjuna Sasrabahu for the death of his father. Rama Bhargava was willing to help him. King Garbhamurti went to the place where Dwi Citrawati was partying with the 800 princesses of the king. Quickly Garbhamurti kidnapped one of the king's daughters, but the governor Kardanadi was able to thwart and Garbhamurti was killed. Now Rama Bhargava came to challenge Arjunasasra to stretch out the magic bow of Bhargavastra. Arjunasasra was able to stretch the bow but suddenly flipped and killed Arjunasasra at the same time. But there was a voice that Bhargava would be killed by a handsome young man named Raghawa or Ramawijaya. King Kartavirya alias Partavirya invited Bombang Suwandajeni, his cousin, to attend the Saraman ceremony, because his queen, Dwi Dhanuwati, was 7 months pregnant. Shortly after the ceremony was finished, an envoy from the kingdom of Lokapala, named Gomukha, came to deliver a message that Dwi Dhanuwati could be brought to Lokapala to be made empress of Prabhu Wisrawana alias Dhanaraja. Hearing this request, Suwandajeni was angry and beat Gomukha, who then fled back to his country. After reporting the failure of his duties, King Dhanaraja then prepared his troops to attack Maspati. He also asked for help from a powerful Brahmana in the form of a giant, named Bhagawan Visnunkara. Meanwhile in heaven, Bhattara Vishnu was ordered by Bhattara Guru to come down to the world to maintain peace. Bhattara Vishnu with the weapon of chakra then entered the fetus of the baby that was conceived by Dewi Dhanuwati. A few moments later, Dewi Dhanuwati gave birth to a son, whom King Kartavirya gave the name Arjunawijaya, aka Arjuna Sasrabahu. Surprisingly, the baby was born with a chakra weapon in his hand. Meanwhile the Lokapala kingdom troops led by Prabhu Dhanaraja had arrived at the Maspati boundary. King Kartavirya and Suwandajani set out to confront the enemy. The weapon that his newborn son was holding was brought to the battlefield. In the battle between Bhagawan Visnunkara and Suwandajani, it was exciting. King Kartavirya then lent his chakra weapon to Suwandajani. With that weapon, Bhagawan Visnunkara could not do anything. His body was completely destroyed by the chakra weapon. King Dhanaraja, who was confronted by King Kartavirya who was armed with chakra, immediately lost his enthusiasm. King Dhanaraja realized that he was dealing with weapons from heaven. Because of that he immediately ran back to Lokapala, Prabhu Dasamukha to kill and behead 1,000 priests in the world. To do this, he commissioned a powerful giant named Yaksamukha. When he was about to kill Bhagawan Jumintan from Gararatno hermitage, Yaksamukha's efforts were blocked by Bombang Kirtanadi, the Bhagawan's son. Yaksamukha lost and ran, but was chased by Bombang Kartanadi. In his escape the Alenka giant met Arjunawijaya, then asked for protection. After Bombang Kartanadi caught up, Arjunawijaya prevented Bombang Kartanadi from killing Yaksamukha. They fought, so that Bombang Kartanadi surrendered. Yaksamukha and Bombang Kartanadi then together served Arjunasasra. Both of them also followed Arjunawijaya to go to Tunjungpura, to apply for Dewi Citralanjani. After fulfilling all the requirements, Arjunawijaya married Dewi Citralanjani, then brought him back to the Maspati kingdom. Bombang Kartanadi still followed Arjunawijaya, but Yaksamukha returned to Alenka because Bombang Kartanadi was still threatening him. It turned out that when he arrived in Alenka, Yaksamukha was killed by Prabhu Dasamukha for failing to fulfill his duties. Prabhu Banaputra and the consort Dewi Kukilawati in Ayodhya were looking after their daughter Dewi Ragawati alias Suksalya, because she was paralyzed. Thanks to the help of a hermit king named Bhagawan Rawatmaja and a giant bird king named Sempati, Dewi Ragawati was healed. After recovering, Ragawati was handed over to Rawatmaja and taken to her hermitage. Meanwhile, Prabhu Rawana from Alenka was angry, feeling that his desire to marry Ragawati had an obstacle, and immediately pursued Rawatmaja. When Rawana and Rawatmaja fought, Dewi Raghu fled the Dandaka forest and met Dasarada and Bhagawan Yajasrawa. Dasarada worshipped flowers to become an imitation doubt goddess and was given by Ravana. Dewi Ragawati survived. However, when Rawana found out that he was deceived, he became angry and went to the heavenly Suralaya. After Rawana went berserk, Bhattara Endra gave him 3 beautiful angels in exchange, namely, Dewi Tari, Dewi Kaswani, and Dewi Trawati. By having these 3 angels, the longing for Ragawati can be forgotten. Some time later Dewi Kaswani was given to Kumbhakarna, Dewi Trawati was given to Ganawan Wibhasana, while Dasamukha only married Dewi Tari. Including the standard play, this play tells of the arrogance of King Rawana, the king of Alenka, which made King Dhanaraja, the king of Lokapala, worry. Therefore Dhanapati sent Gomukha to deliver a warning letter as well as advice to Ravana. Rawana reads Dhanapati's letter. Very angry, he kills Gomukha, then immediately assembled the power to attack Lokapala. The war between the Alenka and Lokapala forces ensued. Rawana competes with Dhanapati, both of them are equally powerful. However, the battle was not over, the gods had picked up death. Dhanapati, to be crowned as a compliment to Cheslokapala, the 4 gods ruling the world. Because of that Rawana sued the gods, asking Dhanapati to be revived. Bhattara Guru did not grant it, as a substitute for Rawana was awarded a long life. When Rawana returned from heaven, he met Vaidawati. Rawana falls in love, but is rejected. Even Vaidawati commits suicide in the fire, so that Rawana is romantically drunk. Dasamukha was furious because she had lost many of her troops in the fight against the Ramawijaya army. On the other hand, Rama's ranks grew stronger and advanced. Because there were many victims who had fallen, Dasamukha himself would have to deal with it. Before leaving for the battlefield, Prabhu Dasamukha met Dewi Sinta. Once again, he seduced Rama's wife, but Sinta refused. Because Dasamukha's lust had peaked, the Kama seed of the king of Alenka fell, falling on a Nagasari leaf. When blown by the wind, the leaves that had been stained with Kama seeds fell in front of Dewi Trajata, and transformed into a giant baby. By Trajata, the baby was named Dasawilukrama. Because she was annoyed at Dewi Trajata who always prevented her from seducing Sinta, Dasamukha cursed Trajata that it would marry a bad old monkey. As for Rama's side, apart from his brother who stepped forward, he himself would face Dasamukha. Dasamukha uses Aji Pankasona, Bhumi, while Rama used a tactic to not be able to reconcile Dasamukha's head and body. Dasamukha was eventually killed by Rama. Bukbis, who was in the form of a terrible creature, was one of the sons of Prabhu Dasamukha, the king of Alenka. He has the mother's only brother, namely Triganga in the form of a monkey. They were born by Dewi Sayamprabha and lived in the Kudawindu Duchy, with her. When they were adults, they both went to the Alenka palace, but Dasamukha did not recognize them as children, unless they could kill Rama and Laxmana. Bukbis and Triganga then infiltrated Pasangrahan Sawelagiri, used a Jipanirep, and kidnapped Rama and Laxmana, and brought them to Kudawindu. Hanuman gives chase, but is blocked by Triganga. There was a fight. They were then divorced by Bhattara Narada, who later explained that Triganga was actually Hanuman's real child. These children then worked hand in hand against Bukbis. However, when Bukbis wore a Waja mask, Hanuman and Triganga were overwhelmed, because from the eyes of the Waja mask, a powerful light emitted that could scorch his opponent. On Ganawan Wibasana's advice, Hanuman fought Bukbis while carrying a large mirror. With the mirror he reversed Bubas's magic rays, so that the creature perished. Rama and Laxmana were later released, and Triganga continued to fight on Rama's side. At Grastina Hermitage, Dewi Indradi, the wife of Bhagawan Gautama, is enjoying the game Kupu Manik Astagina, which allows him to enjoy the state of nature. Suddenly, his eldest daughter, Dewi Anjani, came to see him. Dewi Anjan borrowed the game. Dewi Indradi lent it, on condition that her siblings did not know it. However, Dewi Anjani actually showed off to her two younger siblings, Guwarsa and Guwarsi. As a result, Kupu Manik Astagina became a struggle, resulting in a commotion. Lord Gautama, who was meditating, became disturbed. And, to his surprise, he found out that the source of the commotion was Kupu Manik Astagina, whom he knew belonged to Bhattara Surya. Dewi Indradi, who was asked about the origin of Kupu Manik Astagina, did not answer. He was just speechless. This made Rezi Gautama very angry and cursed Dewi Indradi as a monument, then threw it away, falling near the borders of the Alenka kingdom. After that, he also threw Kupu Manik Astagina and fell in Lake Sumala. Dewi Anjani, Guwarsa, and Guwarsi, followed by their Pamong Endong Suwera, Jembawan, and Menda, all ran to follow Kupu Manik Astagina, who was dumped by her father. Gararsa and Guwarsi, who ran faster than Dewi Anjadi, first arrived at Talaga Sumala. The two of them immediately jumped into the lake, and dived to find the Kupu. As soon as they dive, their intentions turn into apes. So did Jembawan and Menda, who followed the Lord Gautama's two sons. Dewi Anjani and Endong Suwera, who arrived later, did not jump in, but only washed their faces to reduce their fatigue. And, immediately their faces changed to the faces of monkeys. How sad they were when they found out that their good looks and beauty had been lost and now took the form of monkeys. Regretfully they returned to the hermitage, and asked Rishi Gautama that their intentions would be returned to normal. However, Rezi Gautama said that their change of form was the will of the gods. However, even though they are apes, they can still fulfill the Dharma. For that, they are advised to meditate. Prabhu Dasamukha from Alenka invaded the Maspati kingdom with the aim of seizing Dewi Citrawati from the hands of King Arjuna Sasrabahu. On the way, on the riverbank near the royal boundary, Prabhu Dasamukha rested the Alenka troops first. Suddenly the river overflowed so that it hit the Alenka troop camp. Dasamukha was angry and looked for the cause of the sudden flood. It turned out that the cause of the flood was Prabhu Arjuna's body. Sazrabahu, who carried out a three-way drama across the river so that the water was blocked. Thus Dui Citrawati can have fun swimming in the river. Pada Suwanda tried to block Dasamukha's intention to attack King Arjuna Sazrabahu. Sumantri alias Pada Suwanda finally died because Prabhu Dasamukha's fangs were filled with the spirit of Sukasrana, his younger brother who was killed accidentally. The death of Pada Suwanda made Arjuna Sazrabahu angry. With Kalamangaseta's magic arrow he arrested Dasamukha. The king of Alenka was brought to Maspati and displayed in the square. Because of Pada Prahasta's request, King Arjuna Sazrabahu finally released Dasamukha on the condition that he could no longer act arbitrarily. The happiness of the king of Alenka, King Sumali, who had a grandson, with the birth of the children of Bhagawan Wisrawa and Dui Suksi. The two couples gave birth to 4 children. The first was Dasamukha, then Kumbhakarna, and the third was named Sarpakanaka. The 3 of them are giants. The youngest child was born as a handsome knight, named Gunawan Wibasana. After growing up, the 4 Wisrawa officers were ordered to be imprisoned on Mount Gokarna. They then left for Mount Gokarna, which is famous for being haunted. Each took a separate place. Their tapa turned out to cause shocks in heaven. Bhattara Guru then sent Bhattara Narada to stop the asceticism of the 4 sons of Bhagawan Wisrawa. To the 4 people Bhattara Narada asked what was the purpose of their asceticism. Dasamukha replied that he wanted to be a powerful person, no one could defeat him, and he could manifest everything he wanted. Kumbhakarna replied that he wanted to always be able to eat well and be full, and be able to sleep soundly as long as he wanted. Sarpakanaka, the only woman from the son of Wisrawa, replied, he wanted to be able to vent his lust, while Gunawan Wibasana replied that he wanted to always be able to side with the truth, and dare to state the truth. Bhattara Narada granted their wish, but also reminded them that everything always has a limit, and everything must carry risks, everything requires sacrifice. After that the 4 of them returned home, and some time later King Sumali appointed Dasamukha as king, because Lord Wisrawa refused to occupy the throne of Alenka. In Alenka country, Prabhu Dasamukha ordered Pada Prahasta to propose Dui Kekai and Dui Sumatrawati, the daughter of King Kusumaraja from the kingdom of Bengal or Bindar. Prabhu Kusumaraja held a competition, who could defeat Somalawan, the king's nephew. He had the right to marry Dui Kekai and Dui Sumatrawati. The one who defeated Somalawan turned out to be Prabhu Dasarada, the king of Ayodhya. Thus, Dasarada married the Bengali daughters. However, apparently, Somalawan also wanted the 2 daughters. Because of that, after losing to Prabhu Dasarada, Somalawan ran to complain to his father, Rezi Kala from the Taxakenda hermitage. The Rishi, got the complaint, immediately went to Bengal to beat Prabhu Dasarada. On the way he met Pada Prahasta, who was also going to propose to Dui Kekai and Dui Sumatrawati. The 2 then fought. Prahastakala and run back to Alenka. Prabhu Dasamukha, who received Prahasta's report, immediately left for Bengal. He went berserk, destroyed the country and killed King Kusumaraja, Rezi Kala, and Somalawan. After that he hunted King Dasarada, but after meeting, Dasarada was able to trick him. The Ayodhya king said that Dui Kekai and Dui Sumatrawati were now at Kudarangu hermitage to increase their knowledge. Prabhu Dasamukha was satisfied with this information and returned to Alenka, while Dasarada returned to Ayodhya. In Alenka state, Prabhu Dasamukha was upset because many Alenka had died. The last Senapati was Kumbha Kumbha and Aswani Kumbha, both sons of Kumbhakarna, who had died because Anuman had knocked their heads against each other. Now only Meghananda is still alive, and who is her hope, besides Narataka? Both have to face Jaya Angada. Indrajit advanced to the battlefield accompanied by his 2 brothers, Begasura and Kuntalabahu. Initially, Nagapasa's arrow was able to kill Laxmana, but Ramavijaya's younger brother was able to live again thanks to Rama's supernatural powers. Finally Narataka, Dasamukha's remaining son, was killed by Jaya Angada, and Rama's Guawijaya arrow was able to destroy Meghananda. As soon as he was hit by an arrow, Indrajit's body disappeared into a mega that floated among the friends. King Dasamukha, the king of Alenka, thought hard to win the war against the monkey soldiers of Ramavijaya's men. To win the war, Dasamuka seized the Dwaretna flower from the hands of Batara Dana Raja alias Batara Kuera. The god tried to defend, but failed. He then created a monkey with yellow hair from a beetle who had always been with the Dwaretna flower. The imitation monkey was called Kapi Pramuha, and was ordered to serve Sri Rama. After Kapi Pramuha faced Rama, he was ordered to retrieve the Dwaretna flower that had been stolen by Dasamuka. Before leaving for Alenka, Kapi Pramuha first faced Batara Surya and begged the god to create 1,000 sons. When the Alenka people, including Prabhu Dasamuka, were admiring the sunshine in the sky, Kapi Pramuha infiltrated the Alenka palace. With a sharp smell, Kapi Pramuha managed to find Dwaretna flower and took him away from Alenka. Dasamuka was furious at Pada Prahasta because of the loss of Kembang Dwaretna, because Prahasta was the one who was given the responsibility. The king of Alenka reminded him that Prahastaman still had another responsibility, namely to guard the sword of the Kyai Mentawa heirloom. Prahasta had to risk his life to guard the sword. Meanwhile, after receiving Kembang Dewandaru, Rama was sure that his Karanya warriors would win because the magic flower had the power to protect the safety of the monkeys. In order to be more sure of the coming victory, Rama ordered Pada Anila to seize the Kyai Mentawa sword from Alenka. Anila went to Alenka, and to seize the sword was forced to fight with Pada Prahasta. Anila was overwhelmed, and fled, but was still being chased by Prahasta. Arriving at the border of Alenka and Dandaka forest, Anila saw a stone monument. Immediately he removed the monument and used it to beat Prahasta on the head. Immediately Prahasta collapsed and died. The monument that was used as a club disappears, and the angel Dewey Indradi appears. The monument turns out to be the cursed incarnation of Dewey Indradi. After changing his form to Bebidadari, he immediately returned to heaven. Ganawan Wibasana and Kumbhakarna made his brother, Prabhu Dasamuka, aware that it was wrong to kidnap Dewey Sinta. Both asked Prabhu Dasamuka to return Sinta to Ramawijaya in a good manner. The suggestion was not well received, but instead it made Dasamuka angry. Ganawan Wibasana was kicked out, while Kumbhakarna, annoyed, immediately went home and slept. When Alenka's army was overwhelmed by the enemy, Prabhu Dasamuka sent Indrajit to wake Kumbhakarna. After waking up and facing him, Dasamukam berated his younger brother as being ignorant and his work was only eating and sleeping. Offended, Kumbhakarna vomited up all the food he had ever eaten, whole and fresh. After that he wore white clothes and went to the battlefield. Kumbhakarna finally confronted Laxmana. The knight used Narakabala's magic arrow. He aimed first at Kumbhakarna's 2 arms, then his legs. After Kumbhakarna's legs and arms were stumped, Hanuman led the soldiers to gang up on Kumbhakarna. Kumbhakarna fell with the body dismembered. He died for the sake of defending his country from enemy attacks. Ragawa alias Ramawijaya would become king to replace Dasaratha, but from Dewey Kekai demanded that his son named Bharat be made king. Bharata refuses to take the throne and asks Ragawa to stay in Ayodhya, but Ragawa remains at his original position. Then he leaves Ayodhya with his wife to undergo a period of exile in the Dandaka forest. In the middle of the forest, Ragawa competes against Karadusana, who is Sarpakanaka's envoy, Dasamuka's younger brother. Karadusana lost. After that Ragawa continued his journey to Mount Argasoka, and was well received by Sudagnayogi. In the courtyard, a small deer was seen. Because Sinta wanted it, the animal, with her arrow, soon turned into a large giant, the incarnation of Kalamarika. Dewey Sinta, who was not accompanied by anyone, was then kidnapped by Dasamuka. At Jatayu's instructions, Ragawa is unable to chase him and Jatayu almost dies from exhaustion. Ragawa felt sad because he had lost his loyal followers. Dewey Trajata was Dewey Sinta's loyal servant since she was in Alenka and then followed Sri Rama to Ayodhya. Kapi Jembawan, an old monkey, falls in love with him and changes his form as Lasmana in order to meet Trajata. However, Hanuman could dismantle his actions and change his original form to Jembawan. This incident was reported to Rama, who was then ordered to go to Mount Kutaringu with Dewey Trajata. On the way he met Mayaratna, the son of Prabhu Janaka from the kingdom of Mantili, who fell in love with Dewey Sumakar. In his dream he saw a beautiful young woman and was mistaken for Dewey Sinta. On the instructions of Kapi Jembawan, the prince was asked to meet Ramadan to join him. Ramawijaya then decided to go into the burning fire and leave a final message to Wibisana to rule the land of Alenka. Ramawijaya also said that Anoman would live long and was asked to stay on Mount Kendalasada in order to protect him. Mount Somawana as Ravana's grave. Meanwhile, Laxmana explained that one day he would incarnate Kakrasana, a prince from Madura. After everything was ready, Ramawijaya, Dwi Sinta and Laxmana entered the fireplace. Likewise, Mayaretna and Dwi Sumakar also followed Rama into the fireplace. While the Mayaretna vehicle, namely the Yaka Maruta elephant and the Balang Antban horse, entered the Sokarem forest. Ramawijaya, after receiving a report about the enemy's strength, he ordered to immediately attack Alenka. But there were difficulties because they had to cross the ocean, so he ordered Sugriwa and Anoman to build a dam. The monkey soldiers were deployed to take tree trunks and stones in Pasangrahan Malayawan, but they were disturbed by a group of black monkeys under the leadership of Endong Suwera and Bambang Saweda, Suwera's son, but the disturbance was defeated, and even then forced to help build a dam. After the dam was nearing its completion, suddenly it was hit by a big wave so that the tree trunks were washed away. This made Sri Rama angry, so he fired Suwera Jeni's arrows into the sea and immediately the water receded. Soon Sang Hyang Baruna appeared and promised to help build the dam, as long as Rama returned the receding sea water, so that the creatures in the sea did not die. In a short time the dam was completed and the monkey army began to cross towards Alenka. On their way, Rama's army was blocked by giants from Alenka, namely Agsraba, Rahibaya, Uyurumpung and Rahirabada. They attacked the monkey army so that it became a mist. The giants from Rawana's envoys were finally killed by the monkey warriors named Kapi Yazraba, Kapi Rakata and Kapi Menda. At that time the condition of the dam was very worrying due to interference from Alenka soldiers. While Anoman is very worried about the safety of the soldiers passing through the dam, then Anoman did 3 dramas. His body grew bigger and took the soldiers to the mainland of Alenka and built a Pasangrahan in Swelagiri. Meanwhile, Rawana tricks Sinta into making sure that Rama and Lakshman are dead. He beheads Trikala and Kalasekti, 2 of his conquered kings. After seeing the pieces of the 2 knight heads, Dwi Sintas was very sad. However, Dwi Trajata, who was loyal to suspicion and conducted an investigation, went to Swelagiri and met Anoman. Trajata gets an explanation that Rama and Laxmana are still in good health. Thus he will be able to reassure Sita's heart. Sarpakanaka also intervened in this matter. He sent Angrasana to Swelagiri and mingled as a monkey, with the aim of creating chaos and riots. Anoman could detect his actions, so Angrasana was arrested and his ears were cut off and asked to return to Alenka. After arriving in Alenka, Sarpakanaka was very angry to see his envoy injured. He went to fight Anoman himself, but in the end he was killed by Anoman. After bringing Dwi Sinta, the daughter of Mantili, as his wife to the Ayodhya kingdom, Rama's father, Prabhu Dasarata, intended to make him king. But Dasarata's intention was prevented by Dwi Kekai, the king's 3rd wife. Dasarata was reminded that the king had promised to grant Dwi Kekai's 2 wishes. The Kekai request was for Dasarata to appoint Bharata, his son, as a king. Second, expelling Ramawijaya from the Ayodhya kingdom and having to live as an exile in the Dandaka forest for 12 years. The departure of Rama and Sinta was followed by Laxmana, her half-sister. Even though he didn't agree, Prabhu Dasarata was forced to fulfill the demands. After cancelling Ramawijaya's appointment as crown prince and banishing him and his wife, the king of Ayodhya was very sorry, so he died. It turned out that Bharata did not want to take the throne in his father's place, even following Rama and Laxmana in the Dandaka forest. After meeting, Rama encouraged Bharata to become king, by providing him with teachings. Ashtabrata. After Ramawijaya and his men succeeded in defeating the troops of the Alenka kingdom, and the deaths of Prabhu Dasamukha and Dwi Sinta were freed, Ramawijaya returned to Ayodhya. Some time after Ramawijaya became king in Ayodhya, he heard a rumor that the people of Ayodhya were not sure of the sanctity of Dwi Sinta, because Rama's wife spent 12 years with Prabhu Dasamukha. The doubts of the Ayodhya people who influenced Ramawijaya made Dwi Sinta feel the need to prove her holiness. Then Dwi Sinta asked that she be burned alive, and if her body was not consumed by the fire, it meant that she remained pure, even though she had been in the power of Dasamuka for 12 years. When the fire started, Batara Agni protected Sinta's body and clothes, so that they did not burn from the fire. Kapi Jembawan, an old monkey who was sad because of his bad performance. After being imprisoned, Batara Narada came to see him, and said that his fate as a monkey was his fate. However, the gods were pleased to give noble offspring to Kapi Jembawan. Batara Narada then changed Jembawan's form into an imitation Laxmana, and was told to meet Dewi Trajata in Alenka. Dewi Trajata welcomed the imitation admiral with joy because she had secretly fallen in love with Laxmana. There was a flirtation between them. When this incident was reported by Sri Rama, the original Laxama was immediately told to find a fake admiral. There was a fight between the original and the imitation, and at that time the imitation was reincarnated into Jembawan. Rama then decided Jembawan to be Dewi Trajata's husband, because it was already his mate. After studying from Rezi Subali, and obtaining Aji Pankasanya, Dasamuka looked for a way to make his teacher die, so that in this world only Dasamuka would have the magic knowledge. To achieve his goal, Prabhu Dasamuka sent Kalamarika to change form. Became a caregiver for Dewi Tara, and then instigated Rishi Subali. To Rezi Subali, the maid who was actually Kalamarika complained that Dewi Tara was now living in pain because of the frequent torture of Prabhu Sugriva. This incitement was consumed by Subali, so the Rishi in the form of a monkey immediately went to Guakaskanda to beat up his younger brother, Sugriva. Sugriva lost, his body was pinched in the branch of a kamal tree. Meanwhile, Prabhu Dasamuka managed to kidnap Dewi Sinta, and was taken to fly to Alenka. On the way, a giant bird saw the incident and tried to help Dewi Sinta. However, Dasamuka is more powerful. Hit by Kandrasa's sword, Jatayu is heavily injured and falls to the earth. Rama and Laxmana who were looking for Dewi Sinta found Jatayu who was dying. Before dying, Jatayu had told her that Dewi Sinta was kidnapped by Dasamuka and taken to Alenka. Rama and Laxmana then met Sugriva, who was left clamped by two branches. Sugriva is helped. As gratitude, Sugriva expressed his ability to help Rama in his efforts to free Dewi Sinta. Sugriva then challenged Subali. However, in that battle Sugriva lost again. Rama then told Sugriva to wear a yellow coconut around his neck. When the brothers fought again, Rama shot Subali. Before dying, Subali asked Rama why he was meddling in other people's business. Rama replied that he was forced to kill Subali as a punishment because Subali taught the science of Pankasanya to Ravana. There was a riot in the Rishi Gautama's family, at the Grastina hermitage. Because his children were fighting over Kupu Manik Astagina, Rezi Gautama was angry. Kupu Manik Astaganadibuang, and his wife, Dewi Indradi, were cursed to become stone pillars, and were thrown away until they fell in the Dandaka forest, on the edge of the Alenka state border. His three children, Guwarsa, Guwarsi, and Dewi Anjani, hunted Kupu Manik Astagina, who was dumped by his father, until he arrived at Lake Sumala. Guwarsa and Guwarsi, followed by Jembawan's Kantrik who plunged into the lake turned into a monkey, while Dewi Anjani, followed by Sarwi Semban, washed her face, only her face turned into a monkey. After becoming an ape, Guwarsa changed its name to Subali, while Guwarsi became Sugriva. Meanwhile, heaven was attacked by Padalembusura who asked the angels Dewi Suprabha and Dewi Tara to be the wives of King Maseshwara. Because the gods were unable to match Padalembusura's supernatural powers, they asked Subali and Sugriva's help. The two monkeys turned out to be able to kill Lembusura. Subali and Sugriva then went to the kingdom of Guakaskanda, where the entrance was in the form of a cave. Subali ordered, so that after he entered the cave, Sugriva would immediately cover it with the Sela-Gilang stone. If later red blood flows from between the stones, it means that the opponent is dead. And, Sugriva had to open the cave so that Subali could come out. However, if the blood is white, do not open the door, because it means the fallen Sugriva. After waiting, some time later, pink blood came out. Sugriva thought, his brother died with his enemy. Because of that, he did not open the mouth of the cave, then went to heaven to report. Because the gods considered Sugriva to be instrumental, he was awarded the goddess Tara as his wife. The Ramayana book is an earlier Indonesian. Part 6 is complete. Santo Saba works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on academic studies, in an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. Indonesia Arya. By Santo Saba. Exploration and research. Complete info. WhatsApp to +62 813 2132 9787.